Staff of hostels all around the world, what is the weirdest tea you've ever seen happening amongst backpackers? Whilst staying in a hostel in Australia, we ran bus shuttle from the hostel to the town centre. One night we get on the bus. The driver starts it up and proceeds to drive like Keanu Reeves in Speed, bombing down the road in the opposite direction to our destination. After 5 minutes of fearing for our lives, we ask him what's going on. The guy stops the bus and at this point informs us that he is in fact not our driver. He was just some random drunk guy that fancied a joyride. I was the new guy at the time, so I got stuck cleaning the bathrooms. Upon entering the men's room to do my rounds, I hear a man having what sounds like the most painful shitty of his life. I carry on and go about my work for the next 15 minutes and he still isn't out yet. Right as I'm about to ask him if he's alright, this big jolly Brit walks out of the store with a handful of condoms filled with mystery drugs. He looks me dead in the eye, says Singapore 8, and walks out solemnly shaking his head. In Singapore, if you get caught with drugs you can face the death penalty. I used to manage a hostel in Mission Beach, Australia for 4 years. I saw the couple have sex in a hammock while standing up. Must have been surfers. Clearly they forgot how to hammock. At a hostel in Vietnam, I saw a drunk Danish guy slip off a table on a stray ping pong ball, dislocate his shoulder and piss himself. At breakfast. Superb viewing. A stray ping pong ball in Vietnam is likely to be slippery. I've never worked in a hostel but I've stayed in loads. I always remember this one guy in Warsaw. It was quite a big hostel but despite it being summer, quite empty. So I was in a room of 8 beds and it was me, this guy and a couple. On the first day I walked in the room to find him grappling the ceiling as if he was Spider-Man. I didn't notice him at first but then he thudded to the ground and acted as if nothing had happened. He repeated this trick a few times and I saw him walking around the hostel as if he was a kid trying not to touch the floor, clambering on stuff and the walls, etc. When I woke up the next day, he was outside in the courtyard doing a cross between martial arts and some kind of yoga wearing a toga. When I got back that night, he was singing on Skype. I also noticed he was reading a book purely about squirrels. I was working the night shift and basically everything was quiet. All of a sudden this weird little guy comes to the reception and tells me he needs 2 new mattresses. Why? Because he wet his bed, to be honest. Happens more often than you might think in hostels. I say no problem and ask him why he needs a second one. He goes Then another guy comes down the stairs looking pissed. And he actually was. He was in the bottom bunk. He woke because of the pee dripping on his face. At a hostel in Amsterdam, an Australian guy named Steve-O, incredibly drunk, BTW, threw himself face first down the stairs. At the bottom he got up and yelled up to us, "Now that's how you go down the stairs." So many of these stories involve Aussies. I used to process the comment cards for the National Office of American Youth Hostels in Washington, D.C. Part of my job was passing on the info if they got any comments that needed to be investigated. We had multiple cards from one hostel that said things like, "All of the staff here are on too many drugs to function. It's totally filthy and there are rats." This hostel was in Florida. I never found out what happened. Florida. Yup. Checks out. One guy took a dump in a small garbage bin in a 10-bedroom while everyone was in there on Christmas. Christmas. Worked in a party hostel in the middle of Melbourne for a couple of years. I've seen some shitty. Man. Our hostel had 3 bars in the building, one of which was open 24/7. Happy to elaborate. But in short, I've seen the following. A gorgeous Swedish girl in nothing but a G-string stroll into reception and ask for another key for her room. A Scottish guy on ecstasy run a half marathon. An off-duty army guy drop trow, sit on a futon and proceed to shitty on the futon and piss all over himself. An otherwise quiet and reserved Korean girl getting fisted in the middle of a bar. A 40-something divorced mother of 3 in the middle of a 6-guy sandwich, multiple PRN style sex scenes in full dorm rooms. And a lot of other shit I can't remember. It was a crazy couple of years, and even now I look back and think, wow. Did that shit really happen? Edit. This has been fun. And evidently quite the calm of mine. But I really have to go to bed. Feel free to ask any questions you have and I will answer tomorrow. Not hostel staff. But lived in a big hostel in central London when at university. Had a lot of fun in there and saw the weirdest things the time I was living there. By far the strangest of all is related to this girl who was very introverted and lonely. Didn't really talk to anybody in there and had the weirdest behavior. One day, there was a commotion in one of the floors because she was all covered in blood and weak. Walking like a zombie along the hallways. Near the toilets and shower rooms. To make a long story short, she had just gave birth to a baby in one of the shower rooms and nervously kept telling everyone that the baby wasn't hers. In come the police, as in other occasions, and social services, and that was the last we saw of her. I once stayed in a hostel in Sydney, Australia. It had fresh. It's a good thing. It means they managed to wing the dropper as he pounced. If they hadn't, the blood wouldn't be limited to the bullet holes. I manage a hostel in America and nothing surprises me anymore. I have seen people walking around the halls naked. People falling downstairs drunk, the usual stuff, yeah, no. But there was one French guest, he was sober as he had just checked in. I get a call from the business below the hostel saying someone is pissing out the window. I run up, catch the guy, and he honestly thought it would be alright to do that. He swore tat in France that's what they do. Just got back from France. They don't do that. A friend of mine worked the front desk at a hostel to pay for his room when he was in Australia. And by all metrics, he was good at his job. But they had to fire him when they found out he was selling acid over the counter. I love that these stories are 80% by Australians or about Australians. Go to sleep, you bastards. It's nearly midnight. On Sunday. Can't sleep here, mate. The poisonous things'll get you. Or the moth earth king wombats. I don't work at a hostel. But I was in one once in Venezuela when I saw 3 people laying in a row. Arms by their sides and legs straight out. Each with a small dog sleeping on their face. I still have no idea what the FCK that was about. Till hostel workers have it rough in Australia. Staying in a hostel in Wellington, I was woken up by a woman and a man screaming at the top of their voices. She had awoken to find this guy lying on top of her and screamed the place down, and he started yelling a split second later. When all the lights came on and everyone calmed down, we found that he had been on the top bunk and it had partially collapsed on one side, tipping him off onto her bed. She woke eyeball to eyeball with him and just let rip. He was just trying to figure out what had happened and where he was when this woman started screaming right in his face. I've stars in hostels lots over the past 6 or so years, and among many this was simple but my fav. In a 10-bed dorm in Coogee Beach, Sydney. All guys, we went out together. Got drunk and stumbled back and got into bed. We all chatted tea for a bit, then people stated to drift off. Some guy had met a girl at the bar and arrived later with her. They thought they were quiet, but I was sure they were being so loud everyone was woken up too. Either way, I tried to ignore it while they had quick, loud and noisy bottom bunk hostel sex. Once they were done, the room was silent. I still wasn't sure if anyone else had been woken up by them. Till one of the guys, a Scouser, simply said out loud to break the silence, "Can I have a go next?" The poor girl ran out. Everyone was awake and a good hour of lawing ensued. Hostel are great. You def see the worst and best in people. I was working for accommodation in a hostel in Australia. This strange family stayed for a few nights. Really fat woman. And nice, but clearly crazy Kiwi guy. He showed us cuts on his arms, legs and torso that he had given himself so that in a fight, if someone pulls a knife, I won't panic or react. Anyway, on their second night, they all get very drunk and have a huge argument. We hear a smash. and head through to the lounge. The woman has smashed a table and chairs and is now semi-consciously pissing herself on the floor. So a few of our female friends who are staying in the same dorm as her wake her and try get her to bed. But wait. There's more. The next morning, the girls tell us how the woman was up all night talking. It turns out that the argument had been with the Kiwi guy, who was her nephew, and also her lover. TL. Tell the Kiwi guy that not reacting is not a good reaction to getting a knife pulled on you in a fight. I lived in a backpackers hostel in East London for 4 months. It was actually really uneventful. No bullet holes, rampant traveler sex or inconvenient kidnappings. I feel as though I missed out now. Who in their right mind would go traveling in East London? This thread has taught me to always get the top bunk equals. I'm opening a hostel in 10 days and a lot of these stories are the shit I'm worried about. Not staff, but a hostel attendee. In Prague, we stayed in a hostel with a bar that liked to serve absinthe and Red Bull shots. Think jajabums. One guy who we called Bluto, like Animal House, decided he'd go for the record of most A-bombs in one night. Something like 16. I'm fairly sure he made up this record. We all went to bed on the 3rd floor and figured the night was over. I woke up later from a dream of someone screaming, which turned out to be real. The lights were on and the whole dorm was awake thanks to A-bomb guy lying on the ground with blood pouring from his head going giitfuuakt. He fell from the top bunk. They heard him in reception on the bottom floor. Somehow I slid through it. He also pissed the bed and in the hallway. And spent the rest of the night screaming giitfuuakt at his brother. That just made me think 16. I could do 16. Give it a few hours. 16 shots would be easy. I need to take a good long look at myself and where my life is headed. Staying in a hostel in London that had a hot tub under the roof. Middle of the night we hear what sounds like rain. Being from Oregon, I assume it is exactly that. Until the lights turn on and everyone is swearing and freaking out. There's a solid stream of water coming down the doorway and wall. Turns out someone turned a hose on to fill the hot tub and proceeded to pass out, allowing the water to flood through the building and our room. Got a free pint out of it though. I worked at a party hostel in Budapest. In my time there the card game Hostel became very popular. And eventually people raised the stakes of the game. A stake would be decided at the beginning of the game, i.e. loser has a shot of the winner's urine, and whoever decided to play committed to suffering if they lose. Initially the stakes were relatively tolerable. Loser gets a piercing in a place of the winner's choice. Loser shaves off an eyebrow. Loser gets winner's initials tattooed on their bum etc. In my time observing, I was never game to play. I witnessed a guy, the winner, vomiting on the loser's head. The same guy lost the following 2 days and had to lick the winner's bum and snort the winner's semen out of a shot glass. The same guy won for both those games. It didn't seem so f***ed up at the time, but in hindsight it was a very strange way for young travelers to be spending their days. That is f***ing disgusting. Do you have more of these stories? So a friend of mine pissed himself on the top bunk in a hostel in Melbourne. The pee then managed to flow through the thin mattress to a couple having sex below. He woke up to an angry Irish man yelling at him. He told him you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, rolled over and went back to bed. He was forced to steam clean the mattress in full view of everyone the following day. The pee was later described as coming down with the force of a waterfall. People really should include the name of the hostel and a link to their reviews on Hostel World. I really want to visit some of these places. Writing this from a bottom bunk in Helsinki. Contemplating buying a tarp to sleep under. Being the cheapest traveler I was, stupidly decided to spend a night in a 30-person hostel room. Smack bang in the middle of Inglewood. To paint the picture, 30 beds and 2 rows of 15. With about half a meter separating each bed. After waking up to gunshots a block away and a creepy guy beside me quietly asking if I wanted to swap pillows, in the middle of the night, WTF. I decided sometimes it's just not worth saving the extra bucks. Edit. After catching the bus there from Lax and checking in. Around 9:45 PM I went for a quick stroll up the road to get some food as I'd avoided buying airport food. Came back to get blasted by the hostel receptionists to never walk the streets at night. Find out the next day. It was quite possibly the worst suburb to stay in. One of the most dangerous in America. Piss. Everywhere. Australians are f***ing lunatics. I was staying in a hostel in southern Brazil. Opened the wrong door. And was confronted with 4 or 5 hooting and hollering Australians. Butt naked. Shoving cocaine into each other's buttholes. During their tenure there was an excess of public nudity. Pissing in each other's mouths. Roughhousing. And the guys did some things with a few of the girls there. At the same time. Which I'm not sure I want to know the full story about. As someone who is currently staying at a hostel in Australia, I really shouldn't be reading this thread. Yeah dude. Get the FCK off Reddit and piss on someone already. Brisbane, Australia. Crazy Brazilian eats live huntsman after losing at cards. No particular stories, but it's a good time. I used to be a bartender at a hostel. When I wanted to close bar, I'd take everyone skinny dipping on the beach. We used to have a competition to see who could have sex in as many different places as possible. I used to work and drink 16 hours a day. I had a famous musician ask me to go dance naked on the beach with her. There was a full-on whole bar suddenly erupts in a fight like in a Wild West movie scene. It was 4 months of my life for no pay, and I doubt I could have done it much longer. It was a good experience though. Not a hostel worker, but happened to me one night. So it's just me and this American girl in a hostel room. This English couple check in one night and go out to get drunk. I too go out to get drunk with other friends. I get wasted and arrive back at the hostel room at 3 AM. The American girl is asleep. The English couple nowhere to be found. I wake up at 4 AM. My bed is shaking. I'm thinking. Shit. Earthquake. Full stop. I look below my bunk and the English girl has her legs in the air and is getting banged by some guy. I then look to my side and what I thought was her boyfriend is banging some other girl at the same time. Okay. JPEG. Go back to sleep. Because I can't be bothered to say anything and I'm tired. I see the American girl, she was very young, in our kitchen the next day and she's eating cornflakes. Visibly shaking and crying. Haha. TL. DR. It's sad that about 80% of these stories involve Australia some way or another. Yet as an Australian myself. Australian here. I thought these stories were meant to be f***ed up and not just descriptions of ordinary nights out. There's a lot of Australian stories in this thread. We do some really stupid shit. Come on Reddit. OP wants to hear backpacker SX stories. Probably not that weird. But I was staying in a hostel in South Africa that had a shared bathroom with a lot of shower stalls. I was showering at 9 PM one night and there was a couple having loud sex in the stall across from mine. The curtains kept sticking to the guy's butt as he lunged. Very uncomfortable experience. Half a dozen Australians who decided to rent out bicycles while staying on a hostel in Tokyo I was doing night shift in. They then rode around with booze in the front baskets. Constantly ringing their bells etc and pissed off everyone. One night they came back after drinking and riding their bikes around the park, shit-faced. Of course. Decided to give one of the others a haircut with a blunt pair of scissors only good for cutting paper. After they left him with a bad haircut. Covered in black marker pen with rude words. He left. Came back and said that the cops were going to arrest him if he didn't get a shirt on and straighten up. Some random person nearby gave him a hoodie to wear. To which he took off again and left for more booze. At 6 AM. At 11. When they started to get back. They were all kicked out. This is why I hate my own people. FCK, I just got my job here. This thread is 2 months early.